Peak Design Field Plate Review. Peak Design was kind enough to send me one of their new Arca-Swiss compatible field plates that does not require a tool to tighten. Underneath it, you press on one side of the circle and it pops up a tab. You then just twist it to tighten the plate on the camera. The question is, does it tighten sufficiently well? Well, to test it, I tried both of these plates, the older tripod plate and this new field plate on the bottom of my camera. First, I lightly tightened the old plate so that it could be rotated easily, but with some resistance. Then I made a pencil mark on the screw part and the plate part to see how far I would tighten the plate in terms of degrees. I tightened the old plate with a hex tool until I felt it was about how tight I typically tighten my tripod plates. Of course, that's not maximal tightness, but just enough in my opinion. After tightening it with the tool, I measured the angle of tightening to be about 115 degrees, or about 2 radians. Next, I did the same experiment with the new field plate. Of course, this experiment is approximate because the initial starting point is approximate. Then I tightened it with the new mechanism with a fair amount of force without it being uncomfortable, just the amount I use when I'm fighting my enemies in hand-to-hand combat. I measured the angle of this one and it was about 137 degrees or about 2.4 radians. So for sure, using the bottom tightening mechanism does allow you to get the plate sufficiently tight, at least for how tight I tighten my tripod plates. In fact, it went a little beyond that and it was quite tight. Of course, technically, if you really like your tripod plates to be really tight, you could have beaten it with the tool, but in my opinion, it was sufficient. Other than that, the plates are very similar. The main differences are, first, that with the older screw-type plate, you can move the screw a little horizontally in the plate so that you can adjust its precise position on the bottom of the camera, though that should not be a limitation for most cameras. Also, with the older one, you can also remove the screw so that it might be easier to clean if you get stuck in a deadly sandstorm and you need to clean it afterwards because it's full of sand. So the other day I was out with my Nikon Z6, and I had the older plate on my camera and it got a little loose on the tripod because, when you move your camera, it can kind of make the tripod plate a little bit loose. And I didn't have my tool with me, so I couldn't put the camera on the tripod. So I'm going to use this new plate on my Nikon Z6 because that's the camera I put most of the time on my tripod. And I think it's worth considering if you frequently forget your tool at home. Anyway, that's it for this review. I hope it was helpful in getting you acquainted with the new Peak Design field plate. But if it wasn't, try shooting handheld.